So you guys might know I'm a big fan of Proxmox. And that's not just Proxmox Virtualization Environment, the hypervisor, but also Proxmox Backup Server, the all-in-one backup solution from Proxmox. So as part of that, I'm always looking for how I can back up my data more economically, off-site, things like that. Back in the US, I had a tape set up. Unfortunately, they didn't come with me to Finland. So I am on the lookout now for a relatively low-cost cloud backup solution to have my off-site data replicated somewhere else. Now, of course, there's still downsides to storing data in the cloud. It is still someone else's computer. I still have to pay per gigabyte a monthly fee. If you have a lot of data, that adds up really fast. And quite importantly for me, I have an internet connection with a 200 megabit upload. So it'll take me like several days to upload my whole data set. And even if that's only a terabyte, I can do like 200 gigs per day upload, which is not great. But for a small setup like mine, I'm willing to deal with those challenges for $10 a month cloud storage. So if you want to see how I set up Proxmox Backup Server on Scaleway using S3 storage, then come along on this adventure. Now in this video, I'm going to set up S3 based storage on Scaleway. That's a cloud provider that's particularly good at low cost data, at least compared to the other providers. Now of course, we don't want provider lock-in, so S3 is a relatively standardized protocol. So even though it was invented by AWS, it's pretty much everyone else offers S3 compatible object storage these days. The other thing we need is Proxmox Backup Server itself. Now I'm running that in a virtual private server on the cloud, and that's one of the most basic services from any cloud offering. So I don't think you'll have a problem finding a cloud provider that you like to work with that offers both good S3 and VPS services. That's what we need for this video. So this is basically made possible by Proxmox version 4, supporting S3 backends as a native data store. And so that's what I'm testing and making use of in this video. So I got an account set up here. I got a new project. I'm ready to create my stuff. So we're going to need to create object storage, and we're also going to need to create a CPU instance. So I'll go ahead and do that instance first. Now for my use case, I chose development, and I want the Stardust one, which is like wildly cheap. So this is the setup I have. I'm using the very, very cheap VPS, which is like €0.50 a month or something like that. I'm doing this mostly to avoid transit fees with S3 and also to greatly speed up verified jobs. So I've already mentioned that in my case, my upload bandwidth over my cable ISP is my limit here. So going to a higher speed storage or higher speed VPS in the cloud isn't going to gain me any backup time. However, by putting Proxmox Backup Server in the cloud and not running it locally, I'm making sure that all the verified jobs and that kind of stuff runs within that cloud environment and not going across the internet. So I'm saving there. I'm also saving in egress fees. So Scaleway doesn't have ingress fees, which is nice. The egress fees only apply when the data leaves them and doesn't apply to VPSs. So if I run a VPS in the same region as my storage, I get that transfer for free. So the VPS can transfer all the data it wants to S3 without getting a transfer fee, which is how I've optimized my setup here. Now every cloud provider has different pricing strategy. Some of them are very complex, but this is what I found works for me. Now the Stardust is quote unquote heavily oversubscribed. So you're not going to have good CPU performance. You only get 1 gig of RAM. But again, I'm limited by 30 megabit upload speed here and 1 gigabit download. And the Stardust is limited to 100 megabit in both directions. And so I am happy with that as essentially a last resort cloud backup. If you want something faster, you can pay more, of course, but this is what works for me. I also don't have any Stardust in Paris right now, so I went to Amsterdam. I don't know, which one do you think? 1, 2, 3, Warsaw. We'll pick Amsterdam, and we're going to pick the Stardust, and we're going to pick Debian, and we're going to pick 13 Trixie. And give him a name. So we get one volume essentially that can be local. So I can edit this and choose if I want block storage or local storage. Now the block storage is more expensive, 86 cents a month versus 32 cents a month for local. I chose local. This again does not get distributed across their block storage infrastructure, but this is just storing the operating system. So in Proxmox Backup version 4, if you have a data store backed by S3, that S3 bucket contains all of the data needed to bring back the data. It has all of the indexes, all of the backup information, all of the chunks. So if you lose this VPS, you can build a new VPS and connect it to the existing S3 data store and pull the data off. And you can only have one Proxmox Backup Server connected to one bucket at a time. They don't like having two servers hooked up to the same bucket. But if your server fails, if you move to a different cloud provider or something, or even if you just want to mount your backup from home for some quick restore or something and willing to pay the egress fees for a one-time thing, then you can do that. Just make sure that only one Proxmox Backup Server is talking to a given bucket at a time. Now IPv4 costs money, and it actually might even be more than the VPS itself. So we're going to turn that off and just use IPv6. We'll get a nice routed IPv6 range, and it's free. We also need to set up an SSH key, so I'll add my own here. Whatever you're using as an SSH client should have a way for you to figure out what your SSH key is. On most Linux systems, it's called .ssh/id ed25519.pub, or if it's an older setup, maybe idrsa.pub. If you're on Windows, figure out what Windows does. So my total price now per month is 43 euro cents, 11 of that for the VPS, 32 for the backing store. Now, what if I were to do IPv4 here? So legacy IP, let's enable that. Yeah, so it's another 3 euros a month just for legacy IP, so we don't need that in our life. Now I'm going to go take this guy and I'm going to put him in DNS and I'll be right back. So you might have noticed while setting this VPS up, I chose to use Debian 13, that's the latest release as of this video, instead of the default of Ubuntu or something else. Now this was very specific because Proxmox is designed around Debian. So if we start with a Debian base, we can install Proxmox Backup Server using apt packages. We don't have to reformat the VPS and install from an installer ISO, which is another option, by the way. Now, Proxmox Backup Server, if you install from ISO, will install the Proxmox VE kernel. This has support for ZFS and a couple of other things. However, we don't need any of that in a cloud server when we're using S3 as our data store. So using a very basic 10 gig ext4 partition is just fine. So we can install Proxmox Backup Server, just the server software, not the full operating system, on top of Debian here. And Proxmox own docs go through how we need to do this. So we scroll down to installation, and we want to do server installation on Debian. So here we're going to configure the Debian package repositories and then just install Proxmox Backup Server with apt. So now to do our basic setup, I'm going to go ahead and SSH into my brand new server. The first time I do it, I'm going to get a host key error because it's new. We're going to say yes just the first time, and yes, and we're in. So here in the repository section, we have some options. We don't need the Debian base repositories because those are already there. If you're using license, you can use Proxmox Backup Enterprise, but I'm going to use the free no subscription repository. So I'm going to copy and paste this here, and we're going to put it in the file it told us to put it in. So we'll go ahead and nano that file, make sure it doesn't have a dot on the end. And paste in that code and Control X to quit. Now, in addition to the repo, we also need this Proxmox archive keyring.gpg. That's what Proxmox signs their repository with. So you scroll down a little bit further, and we should find that. And they have this command here, which will download and install that. There we go. Good to go. Now I should be able to apt update, and that should tell me what we have available. Yeah, so a few upgrades available. And somewhere in here should be, there we go, Proxmox, PBS Trixie, no subscription. And finally, I can apt install Proxmox Backup Server. Make sure you have the server on the end, because Proxmox Backup will install the kernel and other stuff too. Okay, it's going to send us mail. So let's go ahead and hit Internet Site. Yeah, that's our domain name, and there we go. So at this point, you guys are probably freaking out that I have a server exposed on the internet, which is literally how servers and data centers live their entire life. So we're going to install a basic firewall to keep this guy safe. UFW uncomplicated firewall. Go ahead and install that. So we're going to default deny incoming. We're going to default allow outgoing. We're going to allow SSH, which we need so we can manage it. We're going to allow HTTP, which we're going to need later for Let's Encrypt. And we're going to allow 8007 for Proxmox. And finally, we can enable it. Yes. So now our VPS has exactly 3 ports open. One is port 22 for SSH. Now this should be restricted to key-based access only. You're going to have like thousands of bots hitting up your SSH server trying to connect with basic usernames and passwords. However, using key-based authentication is secure. So as long as we only allow key-based authentication, and we keep our private key private, obviously, then we're good on that. And the next one's port 80. This is going to be used for Let's Encrypt, so we can get a certificate. And the third one is 8007. This is going to host TLS for Proxmox Backup Server. So at this point, if I browse to my domain name, :8007, I get security risk because it's a self-signed cert. We'll go ahead and skip that. And now it's asking me to log in, and I don't believe I actually have a password here. So normally when you install Proxmox Backup Server, you set a root user password. However, our cloud install has no root user password. It just has SSH keys. So it is not possible to log in as root unless you come in over SSH. So that means we can't log into PBS either. So we're going to have to go to the command line and create a local Proxmox backup user through the CLI so we can log into the web UI. So I'm going to use Proxmox Backup Manager for this. So Proxmox Backup Manager user create, appllr at PBS. Now PBS is the realm, so you have to be at PBS, and then you can name it whatever you want. So let's go ahead. Now initially that user will have no permissions at all, so we're going to give them permissions on /, so essentially everything, admin permissions. So this user will be a full admin of Proxmox Backup Server. And finally, we need to set the password. So I'm going to do that with Proxmox Backup Debug API set access password for appllr at PBS to, quote, change me. There we go. So back over here in the backup server, I can say appllr, I can say change me, and I can say Proxmox Backup Authentication Server. And we'll log in. Then you'll, of course, want to go over here to access control and change your password right here. And then we're ready to go. Now, one thing to note about this is that in Proxmox, users who are not at PAM, Linux PAM authentication, can't use the shell through the web UI. So you go over here to administration shell. It's going to ask me to log in. And again, I don't have a root password, so I can't log in. And essentially, that is how I want it to be. So if I have to go into the shell and manage something, I have to log in over SSH using my key-based password. That means that someone can't kind of come in through the web UI and get general shell access. So that's how I want it. One last thing I'm going to do before we move on to setting up the storage is set up a Let's Encrypt cert. So we're using a self-signed cert. We probably don't want to do that, so Let's Encrypt is easy and free. So for that one, I go here to Configuration, Certificates. I need an Acme account, so we'll go ahead and add an Acme account. We have to accept the terms of service and register. Next up, we're going to add Acme. We're going to use HTTP challenge, and I'm at appllr.fee, and we should be able to create that right now. So if I hit order certificate now, it should work. So back in here, we can see it loaded the new certificate. Looks like you got a RSA ones from R13. So if I hit refresh, it should come up with a new cert. We'll remove that exception. And now we are verified by Let's Encrypt. So now that I got the Proxmox Backup Server set up, it needs a data store to put its data in. So we only have the 10 gig drive that I gave in the Stardust, and that's already storing like 1 gig of operating system. So we don't have a whole lot left over. Thankfully, Proxmox Backup Server supports S3 for native data stores really well, and it'll use that 10 gig NVMe drive as a cache. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to create my object storage bucket. I don't know, we'll call appllr PBS video bucket. I'm going to pick the same region as my VPS, which is Amsterdam, and then it's going to be a private bucket. We're doing, backup and archiving, no versioning. I have a free trial. You may or may not have a free trial, whatever. We're doing this by month. I mean, obviously it's showing me the free trial, but we're going to end up with some data in multi and some data in one zone, and we are not going to use Glacier here. So let's say I have 200 gigs there and 800 gigs there. That would be, not bad. If I could somehow get all 1,000 into one zone, we would be even cheaper at $7.52 a month. And then we're not spending any transfer because we're keeping it within the zone. So yeah, not a bad deal. So on the backup server side, we need to create an S3 endpoint. And we're going to have to answer a lot of questions here. So let's go ahead and add the endpoint. We're going to come back to this. So first is just our name. The region for my case is NLAMS. Now we need the endpoint. Okay, one thing I found going back to this has to use templating. So bucket.s3.region.scw.cloud. You can't just put the real endpoint in here because that confuses Proxmox down the line. Next, we're going to need an access key and a secret key, so we're going to have to go generate those from Scaleway. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to go to IAM, create a new application, PBS+S3. Let's go ahead and create that. Next up, I'm going to generate an API key. Do remember these will expire, so you will have to renew them at some point in the future. We're going to pick an application. It's going to be my PBS1 and generate the key. So now I have an access key and a secret key. Let's copy those over. So now at this point, I'm going to add here. Okay, so that is added, but now we don't have permissions to access this bucket. So now I'm going to go to IAM again. Policies, I'm going to create a new policy. We're going to call it PBS Reader. It's going to be an application of PBS type and add rules. We're going to give them access to on video, storage. We're going to give them, give them full access, object storage full access. And let's validate that. Back on the terminal, I'm going to make a directory for Proxmox. And just call it var PBS. It's going to be our cache directory. So over here we can click add data store. We're going to call this a backup, call it that. We're going to say S3 tech preview. Local is going to be var PBS. Endpoint ID is going to be that. And we have PBS video bucket. Do we need any advanced settings? No. Now if you already have a data store, you can say reuse existing data store and it won't delete the stuff that's already in use. But I don't do that, so I'm going to hit OK. So now I have a data store. One quirk I've noticed is that it shows how much space we have in the local disks. So 1.93 gigs out of 9.19 gigs. And not the amount we have in the data store. But let's try to run a backup with this now and see how that goes. So this is one of my PVE servers. So go ahead and add a Proxmox Backup Server here. And now we need an account. And we don't have one yet. So to let Proxmox do backups, I'm going to go ahead and create a new user here just for backups. So I'm going to call him PVE user off Proxmox Backup Server. Generate some nice random password here because this guy shouldn't actually be logging in directly. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll create an API token off of my new user. Token name is going to be my PBS server name, and let's go. So that done, I got to give him permissions. So we'll come here and we'll add a user permission to, in this case, that specific data store, to user PVE user, and we will let them do database power user. Actually, they should be able to read too. Maybe we'll give them database add data store admin permissions. I don't know, how comfortable do you feel? And then for that specific API token, we're going to give him a more specific permission, and we're going to give him data store power user. So with that done, I should be able to come over here and name the data store backup and go ahead and add. So now I can pick one of my servers, I guess TigerDev3, and we're going to run a backup to our new backup server, AMS PBS1. We'll do a snapshot and let's go. And back on backup server, we can see a task going on. We can see it's sending a whole bunch of chunks. So came back from a little bit of a snack and everything is working fine. So I guess that's all the content I have for this video. One recommendation I have is once you've got this whole thing set up, reboot the VPS. So some of the scripts that Proxmox Backup installs with its package only get applied on boot. And if you don't reboot, you'll eventually run out of inodes in the temp directory, which is a fun problem, but they've already fixed this. You just have to reboot for it to take effect. I was also a bit concerned with running with only a 10 gig temp directory. So I chose local NVMe for the temp directory because it's cheaper, but also it should be a lot faster than block devices emulated through Cloud Magic, and so that's good for caching. I haven't had problems with only having a 10 gig temp directory. Proxmox Backup Server hasn't come close to filling it up. Nothing's really come close to filling it up. So I'm happy with that. Everything else seems to be managing that storage pretty well. At least in the last, I don't know, month or so that I've been watching my system, which is not the one you saw in the video, by the way. All the keys you saw in the video and stuff, I'll delete all those after I'm done filming it. But yeah, so I really love Proxmox Backup Server. I use it for all of my VPSs around the world in different cloud data centers. I also use it for all my Proxmox VE systems. So if you want to see my setup of Proxmox Backup Client on like a simple VPS, I can make a video on that maybe if you're interested. I am Applard. I also make my own shirts, by the way. If you want to use BCashFS shirt. I also have a couple other fine shirts on my merch store, link in the description below for that. If you want to chat with me, I have a Discord server, link down below for that as well. If you want to recreate this, I have an affiliate link for Scaleway that helps me out. Thanks for that. I'm also on Mastodon, which is kind of like the Dead Bird site, but not the Dead Bird. And so I think that's it. I guess I'll see you guys on the next adventure.